if we're talking in the context of like multiple world religions, then what happens to people that believe in like the same moral code as Christianity? Like, say Hinduism, they have the same moral code of consciousness and do good in the world, but they don't believe in the same God. Are they punished in the same way as non-believers? Or like, what happens to them, and what are the consequences of different religions? Who's right and who's wrong?
Alrighty, great question. Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name?
Gabriel.
Harry?
Gabriel.
Tom.
Gabriel.
This is a test, something.
Okay, good. You're right. Okay, not only am I being rude
Okay.
to you, Gabriel, I'm being incredibly arrogant. I think I know your name better than you do.
Okay.
What a joke, right? What a total farce. The only way I'm going to have the privilege of getting to know Gabriel is if Gabriel opens up and tells me the truth. If you're silent, or if you play games with my head, I'm never going to have the privilege of knowing Gabriel. If that's true between Gabriel and Cliff, how much more that is true between God and Cliff? I'm not smart enough to figure out Gabriel, and I'm definitely not smart enough to figure out God. I depend on Gabriel to open up and tell me the truth about Gabriel. I depend upon God to open up and tell me the truth about who on earth or in heaven is God. That's where Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Shirley MacLaine come into the picture. They all claim to be revealing God accurately. But the problem is they contradict each other. It's as if you said, my name's Gabriel, and the next sentence you says, I'm really Tom. You're contradicting yourself. So, the question is, are Jesus, Muhammad, the avatars, Siddhartha Gautama, all wrong, or is one of them right? Because they contradict each other, they can't all be right. That's where evidence kicks in. You got to read the teachings of Buddha. You got to read the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and figure out Hinduism. You got to read the Quran and find out about Muhammad. And I'm standing here saying, please read the New Testament Gospels and figure out, does the evidence point to Jesus Christ being reliable, or does it not? Does that make any sense?
In the sense that those other texts aren't as reliable, like they don't have as much evidence or as much proof or as much validity behind them as the Bible? Is that what you're trying to get to?
No, very good. Very good question. No, sir. I think the evidence is the Quran, the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the Vedas and Upanishads are all very accurate. Now read them. Because the question is Muhammad reliable or is Jesus reliable? And although they agree on many points, they contradict each other on other points. So they both can't be true.
So do you just pick one and hope it's right?
No, you gotta study. I'm sorry, I can't do this homework for you. You gotta study.
You're saying there's some points that are, I guess, accepted amongst like all disciples or whatever they were, the teachers, but then you're saying there's some that contradict?
Yes.
So are you saying, okay, would those contradictions be a different interpretation of what the God is supposed to be relaying through them? Or do you think that's like a personal bias in the sense of their personal interpretation of what it's supposed to be and the way they relay it kind of...
Great question. All right, we'll put it right out in front. In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus claims to be more than a man. He claims to be God in human form. In the Quran, Muhammad repeatedly says, Jesus is not God. So who is he? Is Jesus God in human form, or is he just a good prophet the way the Quran teaches? That's a contradiction. Are we all agree on that?
Is that a contradiction?
Jesus is not God. Jesus is God. That's a contradiction. They both can't be right. Either Jesus is not God, or he is God. Second point, which gets to your question, which was excellent. Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and cultural Christianity in the wonderful nation of Texas. All of these teach, do good, and then God owes you. Do good, pile up good karma, and you'll get a better next reincarnation. Be a good old boy. Be a nice lady. And then God owes you. Jesus Christ contradicts all of that. Jesus says, I bled and died on a cross to give you forgiveness, grace, the gift of eternal life, which contradicts the idea you do a bunch of good and then God owes you heaven, nirvana, whatever. You see, so that's a fundamental contradiction.
So if you've never been exposed to, if you live in a remote part of the world, you've never been exposed to Christianity, the teachings of the gospel, then how do you get to heaven?
Good question. I do not know. Why? Because Jesus never specifically answered the question, so I can't make an answer up.
Yeah.
But he makes 5 points that apply to your excellent question. First point, God's character is just, which means nobody's getting ripped off. God is just. Second point, nobody goes to hell because of ignorance. Nobody goes to hell because they were born in a part of the world where they never heard about Jesus. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And God grants their request and they'll spend eternity separate from him because they chose to live their life separate from him. Thirdly, there are going to be a boatload of people in heaven who never heard about Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament lists some of these people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, obviously never heard about Jesus. They were born hundreds of years before him. But in humility, they put their faith in God. God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm trusting you. Fourth point, the only reason those people are going to be in heaven is because Jesus bled and died on a cross for their sin. Nobody's going to be in heaven, according to Christ, because they did enough good, so God owes them. Remember, that's a contradiction between Jesus and every major world religion. Fifthly and finally, although I do not know how God will judge those who've never heard about Christ, I do know that all of us here have more than ample opportunity to read the Gospels. We are responsible for what we do with Jesus. According to Jesus Christ, God created you and me for the purpose of loving God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. But often people ask me, Cliff, what does that mean practically? Bill Wilson runs a Sunday school in New York City, in the place that's been called the most likely to be killed. Bill Wilson, pastor of a church in New York City, has been shot at twice, has been stabbed, and has had a team member killed. One day, in church, a Puerto Rican woman who could not speak English came up to him and through an interpreter said, I have put my faith in Christ. What can I do to minister, to serve others, to love others? And Pastor Bill Wilson said, ma'am, please ride on the bus, one of the 50 buses that we send out all over the city to pick up children to bring them to the largest Sunday school class in New York City. This Puerto Rican woman would each Sunday ride a different bus, would gather a child in her arms, sit the child on her lap, and communicate to the child. But one day, she met a little boy who she began to really adore. And as that little boy would sit on her lap, she would speak to him in her broken English, I love you, Jesus loves you. I love you, Jesus loves you. And the little boy sat there not saying a thing. But suddenly, after several weeks of this occurring, after she said, I love you, Jesus loves you, suddenly, just before he got off the bus, he turned around, wrapped his arms around her neck, and gave her a humongous hug. That was 2:30 that Sunday afternoon. 6:30 that Sunday evening, his little body was found dead in a trash bag under a fire escape. His mother had beaten him to death. Some of the last words that little boy heard were words from a Puerto Rican woman who could barely speak English. And the words were very clear. I love you, Jesus loves you. I love you, Jesus loves you. Friends, that's serving Christ. That's loving Christ. That's serving people. That's loving people. Even if it's a little boy and you can barely speak English, you're a Puerto Rican woman who says to this little boy, I love you, Jesus loves you. That, friends, is exactly what it means to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, most of us are not in the position of that Puerto Rican woman in New York City. Instead, most of us have different jobs. We have different incomes. we live in different homes that are rather luxurious compared to the tenement that Puerto Rican woman lives in New York City. That's not the issue. The issue is, have you taken your time, your money, your talents, your gifts, your ability to speak the King's English or to speak broken English, and are you using it to love Christ and to love people? That's what Jesus meant when he said that God created you for the purpose of loving God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. That woman worshiped Jesus. She put her faith in Christ. And then she began to understand that the real adventure of life is all wrapped up in loving Christ and in loving people. Doing it to the best of your ability. Being faithful. Not being a success as our culture defines success, which has a lot to do with fame and money. No, that woman understood that that little boy didn't need fame and money, but he did need to hear Jesus speak through her, a woman, Puerto Rican woman with broken English, communicating to that little boy, I love you, Jesus loves you. I love you, Jesus loves you. Can you accept that fact? That at the heart of the cosmos there's a God who really does love you? And then, because you accept that fact, can you allow this God who loves you so deeply to use you as a conduit through which his love flows into the lives of your spouse, your children, your neighbors, your friends, your enemies, into every human life? Because guess who needs God's love? Every single person. Have you received God's love? Have you received Christ into your life? By putting your faith in him, you can make that decision right now, very simply, very profoundly. Trust in Christ. Respond to his love by putting your faith in him. God bless you as you make that most important decision.
I'm still a little confused on the contradiction of
Yes.
between the religions, I guess, because
Right.
it seems to me like it's very centered around Jesus Christ, I guess. Anything
Yes.
that kind of goes against him, you've kind of been labeling as something that can't coincide with Catholicism or Christianity just because of him. Even like, what if other more than 2 or 3 religions have the same belief, I guess, but that one belief goes against that belief in Jesus and Christianity and Catholicism, even though it's only one religion standing against it? It seems to me you just kind of put that at the center of it rather than kind of give it all an equal chance, I guess, in the form of the contradictions that you were explaining.
Okay, good. Okay, I think you're asking a very deep question epistemologically in terms of know how do you know something, all right? Does my imagination define truth? No, good. Okay, because there are a lot of people in this culture who say, yes, it does. You will often hear the statement, perception defines reality.
The Thomas theorem, in a sense, yeah.
Yeah, that's baloney, right? If my perception is you're not standing here, my perception is wrong. Because in reality, you are standing here.
But your perception is that I am standing here.
Right. So the question is there enough evidence to support that my eyesight tells me the truth about reality, or is there not enough evidence to support my eyesight telling me the truth about reality? And I would argue there's more than enough evidence that my eyesight helps me pick up on reality than that my eyesight lies to me. That's why I trust my eyesight the way I do. So you see, I am convinced that reality exists separate from my imagination, from my perception, from my belief. Back to my first illustration to you. And please don't forget that one. If I believe that you're Tom, it doesn't make me right. In reality, you are Gabriel. You're not Tom. And if I go around calling you Tom, I'm probably rude, arrogant, but I also just might be totally out of touch with reality. Smoking something you don't want to smoke. Okay? So, the same thing is true with God. If it's true with Gabriel, I can promise you it's true with God. If God is real, then God is a certain way. Unless God is impersonal. If God is impersonal, then it really doesn't matter what I believe about God. God's just an impersonal it. But if God actually loves you, then it does matter what you think about God. Because if God loves you, it means he's personal. He's not a fantasy. There's a he that actually cares about Gabriel. Now, if that's true, then Gabriel's got to figure out, how am I going to respond to this personal being, God, who actually claims he loves me? and wants me to go to heaven and spend eternity with him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that
Yeah.
like is a valid answer to our question. And then we had our second question, kind of again, I guess another like question of validity would be, I guess you want to.
Yeah, it's not meant to be silly or anything, but like, in the sense of other life forms, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
My question was, did God only create this one Earth with this one like sphere of life, and only this is it? Or like, is there a belief that in the universe, you know, there's different worlds with different life forms and also intelligent life elsewhere with the same conscience that has to apply with the same moral code, that has to apply with the same kind of rules that religion governs? Or is this kind of like the only thing there is?
Okay, good. I do not know from the Bible if God has created other intelligent life forms. So once again, I'd be lying to you if I said, well, according to Christ in the Bible, yes or no. Doesn't say. So therefore, I turn to science to ask, what's the evidence that there's other intelligent life in this universe? And to date, I have no evidence there is, but if there's a discovery tomorrow, I'll celebrate that discovery.
So you're saying that like the rules set out that govern Christianity would apply to a new life form on any planet in any galaxy?
Well, I don't know, because Jesus in the Bible never addressed the question. So I can't honestly tell you.
In your opinion, would it strengthen or weaken the argument of religion if there were other life forms found on other planets, stuff like that? Not just necessarily like life form, like very simple, but maybe a higher intelligent like life being, you know? Would that, in your opinion, strengthen or weaken the argument around religion?
Fascinating question. I do not know. I mean, it is. You know, start talking about extraterrestrial life, and because I have so little evidence, I don't know how to think that one through, to be honest with you.
So that would be a dilemma, like if there was life found on another planet, that would be a dilemma for the church to figure out.
And not necessarily just like finding it, but maybe like if they were to be studied, you notice that they don't necessarily follow the code of morals that we do, or necessarily even the same customs. So it's a very big disparity between the way we live life and the way that would live life, you know? So would that still kind of create the ubiquity that religion is supposed to encompass all of the universe and all of life? Or would it weaken that argument that, you know, God is kind of like all powerful and surrounds all life and all creation, when two separate beings follow so like different codes of life?
Okay, in one sense, I think it would be fascinating to think that one through. Okay? But in another sense, at this point today, I feel it's totally irrelevant to your life, to my life today. See, for me, I think that would be an example of playing intellectual gymnastics.
Right, I get that it's very like a big hypothetical, you know.
Right.
No big basis to kind of like start jumping to that conclusion.
Right.
But at the same sense, it's kind of based on that faith belief that you were talking about earlier, of like the faith of like believing there might be something of the same type of order thinking that we have, in the same way that you have faith in the belief that way back then there was a resurrection of somebody of the same higher order thinking that we had, somebody mortal, but in the sense he was also partly God, correct? So he was himself immortal in that sense.
Okay. I am convinced that there is an eternal being, God. I'm convinced that there's only one. So yes, if I discovered other life on other planets, I would be interested in understanding their awareness of God's existence as the creator.
Okay. I get what you're saying. So I guess it comes down to, it's just too hypothetical of an answer and then it comes down to opinion of like how you would handle that hypothetically. So I guess we'll move on to the third question. Okay, so our third question was kind of like a logic one that I had grown up with and never really made sense to me, but we were talking about the Virgin Mary and like how do Christians answer when people say like is the Virgin Mary completely valid because she was claiming to be a virgin and like God had sent Jesus to her, but could she have been lying about that?
Sure, she could have been lying about it.
So like does that interrupt the validity of her claim that she had the Son of God?
Okay, good question. Obviously, Mary could have been lying. Obviously, she could have had sex with somebody else and had a baby. That's possible. The reason that I am convinced that she was a virgin is because that is what Jesus held to. It's what those who knew Christ, the eyewitnesses, held to. And the evidence is that Jesus was really in touch with reality. What's the evidence? Bottom line, it's real simple. Gabriel, if you die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to absolutely everything you have to say. If you die and rise from the dead, the overwhelming evidence is you got a handle on reality like nobody else. So if you tell me you were born of a virgin after you rise from the dead, I'll trust that.
Do you think it's a little too illogical maybe to follow maybe a big phenomenon that has never occurred or been observed, especially like back way in those times where maybe there wasn't so much study about kind of like the function of life and the way it works? And do you think it was a little misleading to follow that one big phenomenon and whatever stemmed out of that to just believe what it like said to be just because of the I guess the circumstances of the extreme happening just once?
You bet. Okay, if atheism is true, there is no God, then obviously a virgin birth is stupidity. But you see, what an atheist is doing is they're limiting reality. They're saying all of reality is matter and energy, and therefore there is no supernatural hand that can extend out and change a law of nature and perform what you and I call a miracle. I instead, as a theist, say, no, the evidence is there is God. Therefore, what's a miracle? A miracle is the Creator who put together the natural laws, reaching in, changing what you and I know to be a natural law, and performing what you and I call a miracle. Todd loved football. He would run around on a regular basis with a football tucked underneath his arm. But one day, Todd had a younger brother brought into his life by his mom and dad. His little brother was Alan. Alan began to grow, but it became obvious rather quickly that something was wrong. As he became a little boy, he began to stumble more. And what became clear was his kidney was failing. They looked for a donor, but they couldn't find one for little Alan. And so Todd one day said, I want to give one of my kidneys to my little brother Alan. The doctors put Todd through a barrage of tests, and the psychologist talked with little Todd as well and said, Todd, do you understand that if you give one of your kidneys to your brother Alan, you're no longer going to be able to play football? And Todd said, I don't care. I'm giving one of my kidneys to my brother. The day of the operation came. Todd and Alan were rolled on their 2 hospital beds into the elevator, and they began to go up to the operating room. Suddenly, Alan turned to his brother Todd and asked him, Todd, when they give me part of you, is it going to hurt you? And Todd reached out and grabbed his brother Alan's hand, and he said, no, Todd, no, Alan, it's not going to hurt, because you, Alan, are my brother. You see, friends, that's love. Love is not just endorphins. Love is not just a chemical reaction in the brain. Love is not just a high serotonin level. Love is the free ability that you and I have to choose, to give, to sacrifice, to serve. The English language is rather poor when it comes to the number of words that we have to communicate love. But the Greek language is not poor when it comes to those words. In Greek, there are 4 words for love. Philia, friendship. Storge, the kind of love that exists between family members. Eros, romantic, sexual love, the sex drive. And also agape. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the Apostle Paul writes about agape, about real God love. He writes, beginning in verse 4 of 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. Patience is love under pressure. Love is kind. Kindness is love in small things. It's watching a person closely enough so that you see what they need, what could help them get ahead, and you meet that need. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. Why? Because love learns to celebrate with another person over their successes, not to be envious over their successes, but to celebrate with them over their successes. Love does not boast. Why? Because agape love flows from the heart of God to you. You allow God's agape love to fill your heart, and then you begin to learn to celebrate with other people the gifts that God has given them. That's real love. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It is not proud. It is not self-seeking. Why? Because love is other-centered. Love is the freedom to care more about you and less about myself. It does not boast. It is not proud. It also is not rude. Love does not allow you to use your tongue to rip into another person. Instead, we are to trust another person. We're to build them up. We're to encourage them. It is not rude. It also keeps no record of wrongs. Why do I want to keep a record of your wrongs? Because one day, when I do something wrong against you, I'm going to be able to remind you all the many things you've done wrong to me. It's tit for tat. It's trying to remain in a position of moral superiority. That's not what love is about. Love is about forgiving and then learning to move beyond the hurt and really actively work for the well-being of the other person. And then Paul writes, love does not fail. Gosh, that's weird, isn't it? You and I live in a culture that says, if that person meets your needs, if that person puts bubbles in your boots, then love them, because they're helping you get ahead in life. But if that person loses their attractiveness, if they lose their ability to help you get ahead, then drop them like a hot cake. And Jesus Christ says no. Love is loyal. Paul writes, love does not fail. It keeps on going, especially when the reasons to keep on going get fewer in number. And that is exactly the quality of love that Jesus Christ has for you and for me. In spite of the fact that we flipped him off, in spite of the fact that we rebelled against God, God became man in Christ, pursuing us hotly, drawing us back to himself by giving his life for you and for me on a cross to forgive us and to reconcile us to himself. Have you responded to God's love? And are you allowing his love to flow through you into the lives of others? That's what a Christian is. A follower of Jesus Christ is someone who has opened their life up and received Christ's love. Therefore, they've trusted in him, and now they're allowing Christ's love to flow through them into the lives of others. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly the purpose for which God put you and me on planet Earth. God bless you as you make your own decision to trust in Jesus Christ. I'm one of the pastors of Grace Community Church. We meet every Sunday morning at 9:30 at Grace Farms, located at 365 Luke's Wood Road in New Canaan, Connecticut. If you've enjoyed listening to the dialogue that we have with university students, I'd like to invite you to turn to Ask Cliffe on YouTube or Give Me an Answer on YouTube. Thanks for joining us for these few minutes. Have a great day.